So I was in my fish room feeding all my fish when it occurred to me that I haven't had to scrub algae off my tanks for well over 3 years now. And you're probably wondering how. Let me introduce you to my secret weapon, the Flagtail Prochilodus. Welcome back to Obsidian Exotics. Today's video is going to be on the Flagtail Prochilodus and why I think it's the best algae eater you can ever get for a large aquarium. Now there's two main types of flagtails that's typically available in the hobby for us. The first one being the yellowtail flagtail, also known as the silver Prochilodus. And the second one, which is everyone's favorite, is the redtail flagtail. Now going forward, I'm going to be mostly focusing on the redtail flagtail, even though majority of the information I will provide will apply to the yellowtail flagtail as well. So here's how this is going to work. First, I'm going to run you through all the basic stats, like water parameters, tank requirements, tank mates, and whatnot. Once I've gone through the basics, we'll have a chat about what I've learned through my personal experience for the last 10 years of keeping probably 20 of these fish, and I'll let you in on a few tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. How's that sound? Cool, let's get started. So flagtails are a medium to large charasin found in South America, specifically in fast-flowing waterways and floodplains along the Amazon River. Redtail flagtails on average can get up to about 12 to 14 inches, although I have seen much bigger specimens. I've got a few personally that are probably close to 16 to 18 inches.
Damn, boy. Damn, boy, he's thick. Boy, that's a thick-ass boy.
With the yellowtail flagtails, there's not too much information available on them, but they are supposed to get just as big. Now, I'm yet to see a full-grown adult yellowtail flagtail, so if any of you guys happen to have full-grown adult yellowtails, I'd love to see a photo. Anyway, let's get to water parameters. Now, these guys are pretty hardy, so they can handle a pretty wide range of pH, anywhere from 5.5 all the way up to 7.5. And in terms of temperature, they can handle anywhere from 24 degrees Celsius all the way up to 30 degrees Celsius. That's 75 degrees Fahrenheit and 82 degrees Fahrenheit for all my American viewers out there. In terms of tank space, the bigger the better. I personally recommend having at least 6 foot of length and a minimum of 2 to 3 foot of width, just because these guys are very fast moving, especially coming from the Amazon where they're a migratory species. They can actually migrate up to 1,500 kilometers every year. Obviously in a fish tank, if they spook, they can cause a lot of havoc. So you definitely want to have plenty of space for them to turn around if something scares them. Now having said that, as they get older, they do calm down a lot more, so they're not as flighty when they're bigger. When they're small, you find they'll be constantly darting around the place. In terms of diet, they're primarily herbivores, constantly feeding on a lot of algae, but you'll also find them scavenging on dead fish. Anything really that's got a lot of slime to it, they'll go on and just grasp at it with their sandpaper-like lips, and they'll just completely clean out any driftwood, any rocks. They're really good algae eaters. In fact, they actually play a major role in the Amazon River to help break down a lot of the detritus that builds up in the river basin. Now, in terms of tank mates, flagtails are actually surprisingly easy to keep with a lot of fish. They do get along perfectly fine with even stuff like tetras, Corydoras catfish. You'll never see any harm done to them. But having said that, you do want to avoid fish that look very similar to them or other flagtails, just because they are very aggressive towards their own kind. So if you do want to keep a bunch of them, you do want to keep multiple groups, maybe 5 or more, because any less than that, one will definitely be the dominant one and will constantly attack the small one. Last but not least, price. So the price will depend on which country you're from. Here in Australia, where I am, yellow flagtails cost anywhere from $60 all the way up to $80 for a baby, and the redtail flagtails are about $100 to $150 for a baby. Now, adults can be as much as $350. Alright, so that's all the basics out of the way. Now, here's a few bonus tips that I've learned over the years. Now, before I start, if you have been enjoying this video and you'd like to see more of these care guide type videos in the future, it would mean a lot to me if you guys could subscribe to my channel. And while you're there, you may as well smash the like button. Anyway, we'll get to the video. Tip number 1. Flagtails have a very high metabolism, especially when they're little. Now, even though these guys are primarily vegetarian, I see a lot of people that are struggling to get them to put on weight, especially when they're little. They'll be feeding them a lot of algae wafers, but still not really getting anywhere. I've heard of a lot of people lose their fish because all they're feeding them is algae wafers and they just don't put on size, they get too skinny. and they just drop off. I personally have found that feeding them a carnivore pellet, a sinking carnivore pellet, as a staple food works out a lot better than feeding them just algae wafers. Even as they grow, you'll find out that it's still fine to have them on a full carnivore diet as long as there's plenty of algae in the tank, or if not, you can still supplement them some algae. I personally have never fed them any algae wafers. I've got heaps of algae in my tanks for them to clean, and because of that, they keep all my tanks clean. Now, if I were to go ahead and feed them algae wafers, they'd probably stop eating the algae in the tank, which sort of defeats the purpose of me having them there. I find that's another issue that a lot of other fish keepers have, where they feed algae wafers to the algae eating fish, but then they stop eating the algae in the tank, because why would they? They're getting the food served to them on a platter. So as long as you keep adding algae wafers and you still have algae in the tank, they're obviously not going to clean your tank for you. Tip number 2, keeping them with stingrays. Now you'll see a lot of videos of flagtails in mixed monster fish tanks, including stingrays. But then if you look deep enough, you'll actually hear a lot of people complaining that flagtails are actually eating the slime coat off their stingray, and you shouldn't keep flagtails with stingrays. So you hear a lot of mixed reviews when it comes to flagtails with stingrays. I personally haven't had any issues with all my stingray tanks. I actually have at least one flagtail for all my stingray tanks. They do all the cleanup there. And what I find is keeping them really well fed seems to stop them from eating the slime coat off the stingrays. Because I have a drip system running in my tank, so I have a constant water change system running, I can afford to feed them a lot more than I usually would. And because of this, I don't have to worry about, them being too hungry and then not having anything else to eat, so they eat the slime coat off the stingray. I just make sure that they get plenty of protein twice a day from the high protein pellets that I put in. And if they're hungry in between that, they can eat the algae that's on the tank. So they still get the job done, but then they still have plenty of protein going into them that they shouldn't need to eat the stingrays. Now, while we're on the topic of tank mates, I do have to remind you, these are absolute psychopaths when you try to put them with similar looking fish like silver sharks or tinfoil barbs, or even other flagtails. Like I had a case where I had a small flagtail that I temporarily moved into a tank with another slightly bigger one, just because I had to move one of the tanks around. And in that 12-hour period that I had it in there overnight, this big flagtail completely descaled the smaller one on both sides until it was like not even any skin left. It was just pure flesh left over. And unfortunately, the small one didn't make it. But it just goes to show that even with that little graspy lip that they've got, even though they've got no teeth, they can actually do some serious damage if they want to. Now, weirdly, they do work well if you have multiples in there. I've actually had great success having multiples together. So as long as you've got at least 5 or more, they tend to disperse the aggression. So similar to like African cichlids when it comes to that behavior, where if you want them to coexist, you want to have a lot of them so the aggression gets split up instead of one getting targeted and then that one just getting bullied till it dies. Tip number 3. Now, flagtails are very highly prone to getting cloudy eye. Cloudy eye, like the name suggests, is when the eyes cloud over due to a sudden significant change of parameters in the water. So it could be your pH, could be your ammonia levels, could be temperature. If something changes too quickly by too much, most of your fish will usually get like a little white glaze around the eyes. And this is perfectly fine. Usually within about 3 to 4 days, it can clear out. Now with flagtails, however, even if it was a slight change, that can still lead to cloudy eye. It could be something as simple as doing a water change and the temperature drops just a little too much, and it would just completely cover their eyes and they'd be blind for a few days. Now, if this happens, don't panic, because they're still very hardy fish and they will recover from it. It just looks bad and also takes a few days for them to actually see properly. So all you gotta do is just wait it out and maybe even add some aquarium salt in there to help with the healing. But apart from that, they'll be perfectly fine. All right, guys, that pretty much sums up everything you need to know about flagtails. Now, thanks to my line of work, I do get to go through a lot of different types of exotic aquarium fish. So if there's any other fish that you'd like to know about or like me to do a care guide video on, definitely leave a comment below and I'll be sure to do that as well. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I guess I'll catch you on the next one.